The story of Martha and Mary has a way of getting people's attention. If you notice the church entrance near the office, the sentence is very clear. Mary chose the better part. This story, this episode perhaps, has perplexed people's thinking. Many people are kind of confused as to choose which role. And some people even say there is a kind of unfair assessment on Jesus' part when he said, Martha, what you're doing is not correct. What Mary chose is proper. Some people even say Jesus was kind of biased in his assessment of what Martha and Mary was doing. This story bugs people and makes them ask many questions. It has been interpreted in so many ways as to choose the role of Martha or to choose the role of Mary, to be a disciple or to do the task of a disciple. The distinction is clear. To be a disciple or to engage myself in doing the tasks or the works of a disciple. So for us to understand the interpretative nuances of this episode of Jesus with Martha and Mary, we have perhaps to embrace these three approaches and at least to discuss about this. There are three different takes on this episode. There are three kinds of understanding this parable for today. The very old and traditional take is this, that shows Mary as the model of contemplation, that shows Martha as the icon of action. So very clear, Martha is the icon of doing business. Mary is the model of contemplation, reflection. Martha was worried about many things: hospitality, bustling around the kitchen, getting tacos ready, tamales ready, fajitas ready, make sure the grill is at proper heat, temperature, degrees. She was running back and forth from backyard to the kitchen, the bustling of kitchen life. And most of you can relate, right? Moms, you know, it's not an easy task, but you do it just like that. I don't know how you became so professional, right? Martha was worried about all this. She is seen as the symbol of active life, moving back and forth. It's a kind of multitasking, right? You know when to put kind of condiments in that, and you are truly doing another work totally. So your mind is totally fixed on several things. God has created you and He has wired your minds in such a complex manner. You can do so many things with same span of attention. So Martha is kind of person like that. Mary, on the other hand, who sits quietly at the feet of Jesus, listening to Him speak, is the model of contemplative life. And in the history of the church, we have monks, mystics, scholastics, theologians who go to their room, lock the door, take the pen or the paper, keep writing, or engage in that oneness of experience with the divine. In Sanskrit, there is a word called Upanishad. Upa means to sit. Nishad means in silence. To sit silently at the feet of Jesus. So that is what Mary chose. So the role that Mary took upon herself is seen as Jesus is valorizing the contemplative life more than active life. But we see this relationship constantly blending action versus contemplation. The Bible is very clear in the Old and the New Testament. What is it clear about? Listening has to come before action. Listening has to come before action. This is the basic principle of how God discloses Himself. When an angel came to Mary, she listened. When Samuel heard the voice, Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Moses went to the burning bush. He listened to God disclosing himself. So the entire biblical tradition gives us this soul identity, saying that listening comes before action. The trouble is that nowadays we act without listening. We act without attending to the word of God. In all these great figures of the Bible, there is a moment of listening. There is that Upanishadic moment when they listen to God's voice. What is the Lord saying? Once you and I know what God is telling us, once we listen, we are in the congruence as to listen and as to do what. Sometimes even with the best of our intentions, if we don't listen, our actions don't fetch the fruit we want to desire. In other words, the society we live in today is not a society which promotes contemplation, right? We are more Martha-related people, right? Are we not? We live and we like people who are busy and active. If I ask a person outside the mass, what are you doing? Oh, Father, I'm busy. Right? I have to run errands, I have to go to Walmart, I have to go to HEB, I have to go take my son to basketball. We are busy. We are engaged in action, are we not? But action without contemplation is problematic. It poses a threat. So this is the first kind of take. Martha as action, Mary as contemplation. That is first way of understanding. The second way of understanding this relationship is Martha and Mary, one and the many. One and the many. This is old philosophical saying, right? This old philosophical problem. Martha, notice the words of Jesus. You are anxious and worried about many things. Whereas Mary chose the one thing. In Latin it's called unum necessarium. The one thing necessary. Right? The one thing necessary, that is the key to spiritual life. But all of us are worried about, anxious about many things of life, forgetting the focus on that unum necessarium, the one thing necessary. When I have this one thing necessary in its place, my mind, my will, my intellect, my body, everything is geared towards that one thing in life. Once that one thing is in its place, everything falls in harmony, unity. The problem isn't about action. Jesus never said doing things is bad. But Jesus highlighted, Martha, you are anxious about many things. She was lost in the many things of her life. Mary, on the other hand, is anchored, is rooted in doing that one thing. Am I about that one thing in my life? Even in many things of my life, am I able to focus on that one thing? If I'm able to focus on that one thing, then I am in a good spiritual space. So this is the second interpretation, one and the many. Doing one thing versus doing so many things. The third one, very important one, perhaps this is what we need. N.T. Wright, a biblical scholar, he takes this interpretation on this episode. He offers us a very intriguing take on this episode of Martha and Mary with Jesus. And he says, one of the characteristics of Jesus' ministry is that he overturns the social conventions. What did Jesus do in his life? Unimaginable things that could be done by any man in the Jewish society. He ate and drank with sinners and tax collectors. He made fishermen his disciples. He talked to a woman in a public space. He forgave the sins of a woman. He made women as part of his inner circle of disciples. So in other words, Jesus is kind of upside down the social conventions of his time. So one radical step that Jesus took in his lifetime was he made women as inner circle of his disciples. He spoke to many women in his ministry. And in fact, the first witness of Jesus' resurrection was who? A woman, Mary Magdalene. See, Jesus is flipping the conventions of the society. So N.T. Wright points this. Martha and Mary are one such reversal of social conventions. Martha is rightly in the space which is reserved for women of that day. Women, your world is your kitchen. That was the convention of that day. That is the social strata. Women are supposed to take care of food. You get the accommodations in place. She was in the kitchen getting meal ready. That was the thing expected of a woman in that day. Not to sit in the main room, living room, having a glass of wine and having a conversation. Right? Martha was doing what was conventionally, socially acceptable. Right? Only a man could sit with a rabbi in a living room. In this case, this is Jesus. Only a man can engage in a dialogue with the guest, not a woman in the society of Jesus. That is the problem of Mary, right? She chose the role of a man. And that upset Martha. Jesus tell Mary to get up and come and help me in the kitchen. That is not the role that she was supposed to play. That is the role reserved for guys, for men. You sit and listen, you are taking the role of a guy. Now we see why Martha was upset, right? Technically, socially, Mary is not supposed to be there. She was supposed to be in the kitchen, in the society of that day. That's what made Martha upset. She is taking the role of a man. But notice what is happening. Jesus is inviting both Martha and Mary to a full participation in what is called discipleship. So this is the key. Jesus is inviting both Martha and Mary to a full discipleship. And this is what the reversal of social conventions of Jesus' time. Right? And Luke, who has written this story, was a companion of St. Paul, who said, in Christ Jesus, there is no Jew or Greek, there is no Gentile or Israel, there is no male or female, there is no circumcised or uncircumcised, there is no immigrant or non-immigrant, there is no documented or undocumented, there is no Indian or Mexican, there is no Anglo or Hispanic. In Jesus, everybody is one. Everyone, male or female, Jew or Greek, Hispanic or Anglo, Indian or Mexican, everyone is called to discipleship. Everyone is called to sit at the feet of Jesus and listen to him speak first and then get into action. So this is where Luke is aiming at, because he was the companion of Paul. You see, this is the radicality of Christ's discipleship. Overturning social conventions. It calls for us to listen. It carried a social stratification. In the kingdom of Jesus, there are no more conventions. The kingdom of Jesus cuts across all these social conventions. It does cut through social conventions. All of us, rich and poor, inside versus outside, loved versus unloved. Discipleship is for everyone. There is no one who should be limited to the kitchen. Everybody should come to the living room and sit with Jesus, listening to him speak. This is the discipleship that we are called to. No matter what society says, all of us are invited to this intimacy, discipleship with Christ. Given this reading, we see Mary as the forerunner, as the prototype of all women in this Christendom, all these centuries of Christianity. She is the representative of all women who sit at the feet of Jesus, listening to him speak as an authentic disciple. She is the prototype of all saints. St. Catherine of Siena, St. Teresa of Avila, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, Catherine Drexel, Dorothy Day, who sat at the feet of Jesus and listening to him speak. That is the invitation that Mary is giving. Dear brothers and sisters, let nothing deprive us from choosing this better part, like Mary. Take your place at the feet of Jesus, listening to him speak. That is what you and I are called to, if you want to be Christ's disciple. Listening precedes action. To be the disciple first and then do the task of a disciple. May we learn from the school of Mary to choose the better part. Take your place at the feet of Jesus, listening to him speaking. Amen.